Welcome back to Inside Outside Innovation, episode 101. Daniel Fozzati describes himself as a product engineer who always found himself frustrated by the ground constraints of innovation systems. So, he took a 30,000-foot view perspective and decided to work on innovating the systems themselves to help facilitate both visionary and nitty-gritty innovation. He talked with Brian about IdeaLondon, China's involvement in European innovation, and up-and-coming trends Daniel is witnessing in the UK. Reach out to him on Twitter at FuzzyDaniel. The Inside Outside Innovation Summit is right around the corner, happening May 29th through the 31st. It's not too late to grab a ticket at theiosummit.com. With over 20 amazing keynote speakers and 500 attendees, Lincoln, Nebraska will be the hub of collaborative innovation. Don't miss it.
Tell us a little bit about IdeaLondon and what's going on out there.
Yeah, sure. So it all started in about 2013 when the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, said, you know what, we need to promote tech in London. There are a lot of companies here. They spend a lot of money. There are a lot of startups, but we don't have a central area like they do in the US, like Silicon Valley. There's no central brand. Mm-hmm. And so it started with the designation of a zone of East London, the sort of hip up and coming area, and it was designated as Tech City. And so the two founding partners, UCL and Cisco, got together from a long historical relationship that they've had for many years to build this innovation center. And the gap in the market is around corporate innovation. Now it's a little bit different, and it'd be a totally different discussion to talk about why this is the case. But compared to the US, interaction between super small companies and super big companies in Europe is a struggle, I'd say, to say the least. And so there was this gap when it came to support of small companies that was identified. And these two institutions got together and thought to themselves, okay, well, we've got all this resource. And Cisco thought, okay, we want to keep an eye on what's on the horizon. Right. And UCL came at it as being the sort of the reckless maverick university that they've always been. They want to take their wealth of knowledge and heritage and put it out there in the world rather than keep it up in the traditional ivory tower. So they got together and they built this center in central London, and we're right next to the Bloomberg headquarters where they film Bloomberg in London. We're right next to all the startups in Google campus, and also the Google campus is a large innovation center just across the road from us. So we're in the heart of it. Like, we're also down the road from the Amazon headquarters, their European headquarters. And yeah, so we've been here since 2013, and we're currently expanding.
And it's a not only space, but it's programming around that as well, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of just another accelerator, because London is littered with them, it's actually a space where to get in, you need to be championed by one of the partners. And those partners need to see whether something can be commercialized or whether they can contribute to that startup in a meaningful way. And we tend to bring in startups that are post-accelerator. So they've already had some revenue, they're past the idea stage, and there's something that we can bring to them and push them to the next stage. So in total so far, I'd say we've of all the startups that we've had inside of our center, I think collectively they've raised just shy of 100 million.
That's amazing. So it started in 2013. So I'd imagine the landscape has changed quite a bit since then. Tell us a little bit about what's different, what's changed, what's the same, and how do you see it moving forward?
Yeah, so I'd say there's a change in the tone and the gear that things are operating at now. Back in 2013, there was the financial crisis. The recovery was still happening from the financial crisis. There was a lot more excitement around encouraging people to reskill and to get into sort of riskier business, like starting a startup. And now it's taken as almost for granted. Like, of course, starting a startup is a risky thing. It's exciting, but the recovery has happened, and now there's a normalization happening. And so what I think is what has changed the most is that this normalization has resulted in a lot less of the classic, I'm going to start an app kind of startup.
Right.
And gone more into, I'm going to solve really, really difficult problems kind of startup. And I can't just do it by having a developer and a designer sit on a coffee stool in Starbucks.
Right. You need much more collaboration.
Now you need a lot more collaboration, and you also need the type of collaboration which I think there's the notion of like being in a coffee shop, disrupting things from afar, being able to affect entrenched entities. And I think that's changed. I think now let's collaborate with the entrenched entities. Now the entrenched entities realize that they are entrenched and that disruption will happen. And it's fascinating to see, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, like some of the activities that we're involved in. It's fascinating to see these entrenched entities proactively try to anticipate their own disruption by getting in the game early.
Right.
It's trying to prevent being Napsterized,
Right, exactly.
And despite having that pre-existing knowledge that's going to happen, it's remarkably difficult to sit around a table with the smartest people in a particular industry to see them struggle and identify where this impending disruption is going to happen and how to accommodate for it.
Absolutely.
So I think to answer your question, I think in as succinctly as possible, there's a lot less appy kind of startups happening and a lot more collaborative ventures happening.
And I think that's the case over here in the U.S. as well. The low hanging fruit of kind of spinning some things up, and things like the iPhone obviously opened up a brand new ecosystem for these new businesses to kind of pop up. But you're right. I think the move is more towards collaborative efforts and bigger problems and some of that kind of stuff. Some of the other changes, you and I had a chance to talk earlier. Some of the other changes it sounds like are happening are, especially in Europe, is this influx of China and their move to innovation and moving not only in their own backyard, but in Europe and other places. So talk a little bit about what you're seeing with regard to China's role in innovation in Europe and how you're seeing that play out.
This is, as I'm sure your listeners will know, it's long harped on about the impending rival and domination of not only Chinese money, but the Chinese consumer. I think we're living in an amazing time where we're seeing two things. We're seeing China trying to open itself up as a viable market for foreign companies to enter that aren't, they're not Apple, right? They don't have the best lawyers in the world protecting them. They're trying to make themselves attractive for regular companies to be able to enter and to run a business. But at the same time, they are so large as a market that they are able to keep the walls up and still make a business internally inside of their own market. So they're trying to take advantage of an open innovation model that I think we enjoy here in the West, which means an open innovation model that relies on a free market, that relies on free flowing of information, that relies on a social contract that is understood in the Western market. So they're consciously taking advantage of that, and then ultimately seeing where are the holes in that model, what has not been protected, and even if it is protected, how can I bring that over to China, put the walls back up, and then go on my merry way. It's an amazing time. Like I'm constantly interacting with delegations coming over from China, looking to cooperate when it comes to intellectual property, when it comes to research, and I assume positive intent at every moment. But I can't help, and when I see the headlines with regards to the ZTE stuff that's going on, and the Trade Department in the U.S., the Broadcom Qualcomm deal that was quashed earlier in the year, and always, of course, the long-standing issues with Huawei as a supplier into the U.S. and the U.K. I can't help but think that on a national level, there is no mechanism to marshal these deals. And because of that, you see this sort of these band-aid kind of arrangements happening between Chinese owned enterprises or Chinese companies or even the Chinese government itself and foreign companies. It's sort of we're looking for precedent, right? You're looking for, okay, Apple was able to go into China and they're able to sell their products successfully, and that means that they're able to sell cloud services. That means that other tech, like major tech companies, should be able to do that. Mm-hmm. But somehow that isn't the case. It seems to be happening on a case by case basis. There doesn't seem to be any precedent being set.
And are you seeing kind of the rise of Chinese entrepreneurs themselves coming over to Europe and starting up shop in Europe, or are you seeing it more from the standpoint of coming over and trying to partner and bring those technologies or people back to China?
I see both. Yeah, I certainly see both. I think there's much more at the moment. I think the attraction, if you're a Chinese entrepreneur, is to come over here, get the leg up over your colleagues back in China by getting privileged relationships in the West, locking those down. So again, taking advantage of the social contracts that exist over here and being fully aware that those are going to be respected because they happened over here, and then taking those back to China. And then because of the nature of the business and because of the nature of what was built, they have the leg up over in their home territory.
Right, to expand it and build into their existing large marketplace.
Right. So it's taking advantage of super open market over here and then super closed down market over there.
So talk to us a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about the couple of trends you've seen, obviously with the change in the startup environment, the more collaborative corporate environment, getting involved in startups and that, the rise of China and some of the things going on from that perspective. Are there any other kind of trends or things that you're looking for in the innovation ecosystem that you think are going to be playing out in the next few years that people should be aware of?
If I think about our local market here, and when I say local market, I obviously am talking about the greater European single digital market. So I would say there's a real opportunity at the moment to solidify Europe as a talent pool for artificial intelligence. I think they're uniquely placed in this particular technology because it's a horizontal technology, right? It goes across sectors, and because it's a technology that is dependent on great minds it's not very capital intensive. It is valuable, and that's not to say that a lot of money hasn't been thrown at it at crazy valuations, but it's not capital intensive in the ways that you could only raise money for this type of technology if you were in the US or you were in China or you were in India. So it's different than previous waves, I would say. So there's an opportunity for Europe to solidify itself. And London, if you look at the deals that have gone through in AI in the past probably 4 years, there's a disproportionate amount of money, particularly in AI, that's been spent in London. It is, I would say, a AI capital of Europe. If you look at just the proportion, I would go so far, and I'm happy to be corrected, but I would say just by per capita, it's probably AI capital of the world.
Excellent. Well, I know you're busy with a lot of different things going on in the ecosystem. I know you're a mentor at Startup Bootcamp, and there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of accelerators, a lot of other things going on in London. Is there anything else kind of on the horizon or things people should know about if they're either passing through London or would like to understand what's going on in Europe when it comes to innovation, other things that you've seen or are excited about being a part of moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about the stuff that we're working on now. So there's two things that I spend sort of 50% of my time on at the moment, and that's EdTech accelerator called Educate, and that's essentially pulling in the best in the business along with academia to encourage EdTech startups to build products across the UK. It's a really unique collaboration between the Institute of Education. So I think they're just got rated again #1 institute in the world that studies the efficacy of a particular approach to education. if you look at the size of the market for education in particular, again, thinking about China, it's massive. It's an area that I think is underserved, particularly in education. If you look at the big tech companies and how they've approached and sort of tried to reapproach education recently, the book is still to be written. I think Apple's recent push shows that they're having a rethink on how to deal with it from a hardware perspective and a software one,
right.
and Google as well. So I think that there's a watch this space warranted for the edtech space. The other thing, which I alluded to earlier, is anticipating disruption. And I think this is a topic that, if I zoom out even more, may call it even a 60,000 foot view, I think that's something that really hit me recently, where you've got, sitting around a table with the top law firms in the UK, sort of the best. These are the law firms that, they defend criminals, but they also do corporate law, and they've contributed to writing laws for the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the creme de la creme, and they're in the same room, and they're saying, you know what, our industry is about to be disrupted. We know this. Natural language processing is getting really good. People are able to get written documents as if it was written by a lawyer, but it's actually written by a machine.
Right.
So you've got these people around the table, and they're genuinely wondering, how are we going to anticipate this disruption? How do we do it? So UCL and these law firms, along with Barclays, the bank, Barclays Eagle Labs, have put together a collaboration called the Barclays Legal Tech Hub, is what we're calling it at the moment. And that is essentially for this industry, the legal industry, to set a theme for how they see their industry, is going to be disrupted. And you can see how some people are thinking, okay, maybe it'll be disrupted because things will get that much easier because we'll use chatbots for everything.
Right.
Or maybe it'll be disrupted because people they'll just want to Google everything, and they'll want it for free. And oh my God, what are we going to do to our billable hours? And nobody wants to go back as head of innovation from their respective law firms and say, guys, the billable hours are not going to happen anymore.
The business model doesn't work anymore. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so sitting around this table and genuinely trying to come up with a structure whereby incoming startups can collaborate with you. What do? Do they shadow your company? Do they understand your workflow? Do they build tools to replace you, or do they build tools to augment you? I think never before, if you looked at any other industry, has there been such collaboration.
That's the end of another episode of Inside Outside Innovation. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Daniel for the great conversation. Let us know what you're looking forward to at the summit at the IO Podcast on Twitter. Until next time, go out and innovate.